And in there, I did an EVP session on my BlackBerry. I
Oh,
still
wow.
remember it in great detail. Basically, I asked a load of questions, had no reply.
Mm.
Asked what happened to the ghosts there, and after I asked that, you hear something reply hung.
Oh, wow. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Drip podcast. I'm joined by Scott. It's just me and Scott. Scott, hello.
Hello.
So, why is it just me and Scott? Well, first of all, this podcast can operate with any two team members, so that's one reason. But the other is I kind of wanted to do a little series. I'm not saying these will be back to back to back, but in fact, they won't. But this is the first of a one-on-one where I'm going to be chatting with a co-host of this podcast about their beliefs, about their experiences, and just all things paranormal, really. So, Scott, the
Hello.
paranormal. Now,
Yes.
you've obviously got Tepis Paranormal, your own channel, as well as being
Mhm.
part of the Drip team. And through that, I feel like a great place to start. Well, I guess a great place to start would be what is your belief, but we won't go there just yet. So, on the Tepis Paranormal channel, you've interviewed many people. Some people that I'd actually quite like to get on this show as well. Cross-examine them from your pod. Let's talk about it. So, how many people roughly have you interviewed? All paranormal
So
people, by the way.
yeah, so there's a range of people. I think ranging sort of from, I guess, more well-known people,
Mm-hmm.
and then going down the list into slightly more niche people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it must be about 10 or 15,
Yeah.
maybe 10. I haven't actually counted, so yeah. I think it's
Fair.
probably there's a solid number.
Yeah, and they range from occult collectors to would you say the guy? I'm thinking about the guy that's like a professor within Bigfoot. Would you say it's a big? Was he a
Yeah.
Bigfoot hunter, or is he just a highly researched person in that field?
Yeah, so that's Jeff Meldrum. I would say he's just an academic within the Bigfoot sort of subcategory,
Right.
which is again quite a niche subcategory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and it's quite an interesting. So for him, I was watching Expedition Bigfoot on Discovery Plus,
Nice.
a great streaming platform.
Shout out. They're not sponsoring us just yet, but hopefully so in the future.
But yeah, I was watching through that because obviously that's got all the paranormal stuff
Yeah.
on it. And I was watching through that, and he was on one of their episodes as just an expert. They were consulting on some hair they found in the bird's nest,
Right. Okay.
and I saw him on there, and he was talking about Bigfoot stuff. I thought I'll send him an email. I highly doubt he'll reply because he's like quite high up. He's the head of a department at a university in America. It's quite a high
Yeah.
position.
And he's on
And then
a Disney Discovery Plus documentary.
yeah, and then sort of in the process of emailing him, I read a few more things about him, and I was like, he's really like he's one of the world's leading Bigfoot authority figures almost.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I sent him an email, and he's one of those really cheery people that's really happy to share
Okay.
his passion.
Yeah.
And it kind of took me by surprise how happy and how like open he was about it.
Yeah.
Although I will say I didn't understand half of what he was saying to me because he was talking in science,
Right.
and
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm not a man that deals with science and biology.
Yeah. That's fair enough. So like what sort of things, without obviously, people can go and listen to that episode of the Tepper's Paranormal podcast. And like I say, we'll try and get him on this show as well. But what sort of, obviously he believes in Bigfoot. And I'm just going to say right now, I'm not ruling it out. I'm certainly open to the possibility. But like, what sort of like made him dedicate so much of his life to proving the existence of Bigfoot?
So, from what I understand, it's where he grew up.
Right.
Where he grew up was kind of, I believe, like Bigfoot Central in America.
Okay.
It's meant to have quite a not a high population, but a relative number of sightings compared to a lot of other places. And then he has So he's also a very firm believer in the Patterson Gimli film, which I know
Right.
we've
Yeah.
discussed
Yes, we
in the
have. Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
He, because of what his doctorate's in, which is primate and like ape movement,
Hmm.
he's analysed that footage down to like muscle movement
Right. Yeah.
and exact strides. And because of that, he basically can't see it being anything else
Okay.
other than a Bigfoot in that video.
Yeah.
But I think because of that, he's dedicated a lot of time to analysing hair samples and
Hmm.
travelling the world interviewing people.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it, like with something like that, whether you believe it or not, I feel like you can appreciate. It's a pretty cool thing. It's a pretty cool job to have. Going around trying to convince people that Bigfoot exists. Did he ever have like a first-hand experience being from an area where Bigfoot is a alleged common occurrence?
So, as far as I can tell, nothing that he experienced firsthand, but
Right.
from the conversations he had with other people and in places he's been, it's kind of like a lot of the things he seemed to say seem like I found these footprints that might be Bigfoot, and we can't rule out, or, we can't say it was anything else.
Right. Yeah.
But while he never actually, I guess, saw Bigfoot, nobody ever rode him up into a spliff and wandered off with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I
So
feel like
funny.
he's got like he's seen things Bigfoot related, but never actually Bigfoot itself, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I see. I see. Yeah. So that's one of the guests that you've had on that kind of, um, you know, what am I trying to say? Like not reached out to me, but like stood out to me.
Hmm.
And another one which is intriguing to me is the Occult Collector, who
Yeah.
doesn't believe in the paranormal, but he has like the biggest. Does he have the biggest Ouija board collection in the world or something like that?
He's one of the he was quite high up. I don't know if he still is. Of the a member of the Talking Board Society, which is basically a historic society in America dedicated to the history and the preservation of Ouija boards.
Right.
And as a part of that, he has hundreds of Ouija boards.
Incredible.
I know he's recently sold bits of his collection
Mm.
because I think he was moving.
Right.
I've only sort of been half keeping up with it on his Instagram, but he still has quite a bit of stuff,
Okay.
and he's moving into I think a more purpose built sort of location for it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so his collection his collection intrigues me because, like you say, he doesn't believe in the paranormal, but some of the stuff he has is kind of like so the Ouija boards obviously were one, but then he also has an entire sort of range of animals and freak animals,
Right.
which are completely separate to the paranormal, but sort of branched on in the cryptid sense. So
Okay.
he has the taxidermied carcass or body of a two-headed cow.
Oh wow.
He's got a couple of like baby sort of pigs that are just completely deformed,
Right.
and then he has a pet two-headed turtle.
Okay. So that's fascinating because, like you say, he doesn't obviously deformities are just a part of nature,
Yeah.
but to he's obviously I don't want to speak on his behalf, but he's clearly interested in the obscure, isn't he? But it
So
just blows my mind that he's got all of these occult items but doesn't believe in it.
So his reason behind it is that essentially he said that he wants to believe in the
Right.
paranormal. He wants
Okay.
there to be something, but he can't believe it. And he
Yeah.
decided instead of being one of those people that sits at home on his sofa just saying it's not real, he wants to. So he does a lot of ghost hunting. He does a lot of paranormal investigation.
Yeah.
He goes to haunted places,
Okay.
and then in some cases he goes to haunted places and asks if he can have bits of their wallpaper,
Nice.
which is also in his collection,
Hey,
which
at
I got to
least he
respect.
asks. At
Yeah.
least he asks.
But so and then he says, basically, if he really wants to believe and he wants, to investigate it, the best way to do that is to surround himself with things that should be haunted.
Okay. I have a great deal of respect for that, because like that was literally my motivating factor to go out and do investigations myself. Was like, do I think these things exist? I don't. I wasn't a no, but I want to be proven wrong. I was an I don't know, so I want to find out. But I don't want to sit on a sofa and judge everyone from the comfort of my sofa on the internet. I want to go out and discover it for myself. So I fully appreciate that. That's really cool. And like you say, surrounding yourself with all these objects is a great way to try and achieve that. No, that's really interesting. And obviously, the other interesting thing about this man, what was his name? Sorry,
Calvin von Crush.
Calvin von Crush. The very interesting thing about Calvin von Crush is his wife. Is it his wife or his partner?
So it was his fiance.
Oh,
they have now unfortunately split up.
Oh no. Well, was it a factor that he didn't believe and she really did? Wasn't she a medium? A medium vampire?
She's a medium professional tarot card reader.
Yeah.
And and vampire historian.
Right.
With a keen interest in vampires.
Right.
Who basically loves everything vampire.
Okay. Now I can imagine, and listen, I'm no relationship counselor or anything like that, but I can imagine it would put a little strain on the relationship when you have a lady who is as passionate about these things and believes them as strongly as she does, and then you have a gentleman who is like, listen, I love collecting it, but it's all bollocks. It's probably it might put a little bit of strain on the,
I did raise that with one of them. I can't
Maybe
remember
you
which
planted the seed.
I interviewed them back to back. I reached out to him because I saw him on a documentary a while back.
That's so cool.
And he was attending a paranormal conference in the UK, and I kind of just went through their guest list, emailing people.
Nice. He's American, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And he basically went, hey, when you're done interviewing me, do you want to interview my, at the time, fiance?
Perfect.
Whose name is Jules, I think.
2 episodes in one night. The podcast dream.
Yeah, Jules Nolan. He was like,
Nice.
do you want to interview her as well? She'll be free. I was like, yeah, why not?
Nice.
But she was obviously less well known, I would say.
Yeah.
At least in the paranormal world. So it was more difficult going into that because I sort of didn't know who she was.
If I remember correctly, I think you showed me. Doesn't she have a bit of a TikTok following, or she has a bit of a TikTok thing going on?
So she was, I think she is the Hex Baby on TikTok and Instagram, I think.
Right.
And yeah, like you said, she has a bit of a following there. She basically posts random bits of vampire history, seance history, things like that. Like we said, she's a paranormal investigator as well. She, I believe, is a medium to some extent. I don't know to what extent, but I believe she has some sort of mediumship ability, and a professional tarot card reader.
Nice.
During the day.
So that intrigues the vampire historian part intrigues me, because to me a vampire is a fictional creature. I know you could argue cryptid, etc., but to me it's a fictional creature. So when you say historian of that, do you mean like historian of vampire fiction, or historian of vampires because they're real?
So I kind of thought that going into this. So talking to her about it, kind of both. Like I say, she loves everything vampire related.
Yeah.
Including actual cases.
Okay.
And like, I kind of just started. So before, I had about half an hour of Googling random vampire cases. And I threw a few at her during the interview, and she knew them for one, which was like, okay, I've kind of picked a couple of random creatures and things here from around the world.
And it wasn't just, ever heard of Vlad the Impaler?
Yeah, so like, I think it was the Highgate vampire, which is a vampire in London, allegedly.
Right, okay. When you say vampire, sorry, I don't mean to derail your train of thought. When you say like vampire cases, do you mean like a murder case where like they drank the blood, or is it literally kind of like a vampire story?
Yeah, kind of. Again, all of them. So one of the ones, one of the ones I threw out was the Highgate Vampire, which is essentially a mysterious, tall, dark, clouded figure seen in a cemetery in London with glowing red eyes
Oh,
that allegedly rose out of a tomb or out of a
I
grave.
mean, that's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. And it's just things like that. Like, it's basically anything that sort of goes under the vampiric kind of general description. She seemed to have
Right, okay.
quite a bit of knowledge about.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Which was she had a very impressive sort of bank of knowledge,
Yeah.
which I think is with a lot of the people I've interviewed, most of them have been like, because obviously they've all got a niche,
Yeah.
they've all got their own little niche category, but from there it's kind of like, okay, that really spirals.
That's fair.
So one of the other ones I interviewed that was one of my favorite interviews was Jeff Bellinger,
Uh-huh.
who's the guy who helps write Ghost Adventures.
Yes, right. Is that the guy who also owns the Derby jail?
No, that's Richard from Most Haunted.
That's Richard. You've also interviewed him?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, back to Jeremy.
Yeah. So Jeff.
Sorry.
Jeff, yeah, he basically, they reached out to him. So after Ghost Adventures did its initial 3 location documentary, they reached out to him as one of the leading sort of general folklorists,
Right.
and he's a very established writer.
Mhm.
He's written for quite a few things through his career, and essentially they reached out to him to ask him to help them write the history part of the show.
Okay. I was
help-
getting slightly concerned because I thought, hang on, writer for a paranormal show.
Yeah,
But not
he gets
scripted.
that a lot. That
I
was
bet
one of the
he
things he
does.
said. Whenever people say he's the writer for Ghost Adventures, like, oh, so it's all fake. He's at
No, he's
basically
writing the
up in
history.
so at the start of Ghost Adventures, the first sort of 15 minutes is normally all of the like B-roll footage
Yeah.
with Zach walking around talking about places.
Yeah,
He basically writes that entire portion.
I see.
And then the second the investigation starts is where he drops out.
Right.
He's the one that helps them basically find the names of people. He'll call up random like places that are nearby, like random bakeries that are nearby, and be like, "Hey, do you know if anyone died there 15 years ago?"
Yeah.
And he's the person that delves in to find the intricate detail.
So he's a writer and researcher for the show, basically. Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
He was pretty cool.
So it's no different to like the first episode. Sorry, the first time we went to the Ancient Ram Inn. You wrote the script for the thingy for me, didn't you?
Yeah,
The
essentially.
history
Yeah,
of
essentially that. Essentially, it
The
is just
script for the history of the Ancient Ram Inn. I just want to get that out there. The history, not the actual investigation. Before anyone goes there. Yeah. Okay. So he does that. So yeah. So he was one of your favourites.
He was one of my fans, and again, like you said, Richard formerly from Most Haunted,
Yeah.
who also owns Derby Jail and does ghost tours around Derby.
Mm-hmm.
He's also the guy who he had a 2-man show with Derek Acora after Derek got kicked off of after Derek got removed from Most Haunted. Him and Derek did a 2-man show together.
Oh, after.
After, because they were still good friends, because they'd made a friendship over the years.
Yeah.
And Richard has said, and I'm inclined to believe him, just because of how passionate he was.
Yeah.
He basically said that he thinks Derek was legitimate.
Right.
He thinks Derek was a showman
Mm-hmm.
who played into it over the top for the show.
Right.
And that, yes, what he did on the show was faked, because at the end of the day, it's television. It has to be. Which is I always find that quite interesting about, Most Haunted, Ghost Adventures, things like that, because it's a very valid point.
Mm.
If you release a 45-minute episode on, Really or the Travel Channel, and nothing happens,
Yeah.
that isn't, with a YouTube video, you can get away with that.
Yeah. Because we're only what's the word? Like we're
Yeah.
You know,
I don't. I don't
we're
want to say
only.
amateur.
No, I was gonna say like we are only. What's the word? Not responsible. We are only. What is it when you have to?
We're only
We're only
accountable to
accountable
ourselves.
to
Yes.
ourselves. Whereas
Yeah, we don't
if
have a TV network.
yeah, where they're like, we're not putting this shit out. Nothing's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
So
makes
he kind of
sense.
said that he thinks at points Derek was told by the
Mm-hmm.
network that he had to make interesting things happen,
Yeah.
and he had
Okay.
to, be, I guess, controversial.
Yeah. Well, I guess the
Um,
thing is with a medium, with something like that, other than just straight up not believing them, if a medium walks into a room and goes, "Oh my god, there's a ghost in the corner," there's no way for you to disprove it. There's no way to
yeah,
prove it, but there's no way to like disprove it other than being like you're full of shit. So, I would entirely. I'm not saying this is the case, but I would entirely believe a producer to go, "Look, this is someone who died here 20 years ago. Go in that room and say that you can see him." I'm not saying
yeah,
that's what happened, but I'm just saying I can see why a TV producer trying to get ratings, etc., would do something like that.
yeah. And then, so Richard then went on to basically say that after him and Derek both stopped doing Most Haunted,
Hmm.
Richard, I believe, just sort of drifted away from it. Other
Right.
commitments of his kind of grew in place.
Yeah.
Um, so because he originally Most Haunted wanted to go to Derby Jail,
Right.
and
And
obviously as the owner of Derby Jail, that was how they met.
right. I see. Okay. Okay.
So Yvette, Carl, and Stu went to the jail. They sort of picked him up while he was there and went, "You're quite knowledgeable. You're quite presentable on TV, etc.
Yeah.
Um, come with us to all the other ones."
Mm-hmm.
And he's very thankful for it. Like he didn't really have any bad things to say about Most Haunted.
Yeah.
But he's also fully accepting that it's kind of moved on without him.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Mm. And then one of the other, so again, there've been quite a few sort of things that have. One of my favourite niche interviews, and it was a very odd interview.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, I'm a big fan of the Mothman.
Yes.
I reached out to the Mothman Museum, which we obviously watched a documentary about on your Twitch a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago during lockdown, I think,
Yeah.
where they had the Mothman pageant and all of that, the fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I reached out to the museum from that and got a guy named Steve, who volunteers at the museum and has again kind of dedicated his life to Mothman.
Okay.
The extent he basically upped his entire life from where he lived and moved to Point Pleasant, West Virginia,
Wow.
because he had such a fascination with the Mothman.
Yeah.
Um, and an interview. He kind of reminds me of Ronnie.
Okay.
He's kind of eccentric, but in a really interesting. You could just listen
Yeah.
to him talk,
Very
but
passionate.
he does kind of sometimes ramble off. He gets caught in his own story, and then he's 5 minutes down the road, and you're still trying to work out what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he was telling me something about the Mothman, and then suddenly Bigfoot was teleporting in through portals, and I was like,
Hang on a minute.
okay, I
Yeah.
just about know what you were saying.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was the guy that sort of initially brought up the high activity areas,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which is basically, I don't think those are the exact words he used, but which is basically an area. So an area where you have like ghost sightings or Mothman sightings, you also seem to always have throughout history UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings,
So like
ghost sightings, things like that.
so like Rendlesham and Skinwalker
Yeah.
Ranch, places like that.
Yeah, yeah. So like, obviously they're very high paranormal points essentially,
Yeah.
and things happen there. Not specifically just like one thing, but lots of different things seem to
Yeah.
happen there. He mentioned that, and I was like, "That's a very good." And then he sort of went on a bit of a tangent that led to him potentially saying that Mothman, Bigfoot, UFOs were all the same thing at different points in history.
Right. What, like
So like,
interdimensional beings or something like that?
again, this is where I kind of lost
Yeah.
him, to be honest. This was about half an hour into it, and I was sort of like, I don't really know what's happening now.
Yeah, yeah.
I was making notes, and I was like,
You've
I've
opened
been
Pandora's
scrolling.
box.
Yeah, I think the point he was sort of making was that what started off as, say, Bigfoot evolved, time slipped back into the same place as Mothman, and then in the future came back again as a UFO.
Right. Okay. Well, hey, listen, a
Did
theory's a
lose me, can't
theory.
lie.
A theory is a
Yeah,
theory.
yeah. But yeah, he was definitely, and he was an interesting interview because again, it was just very different.
Yeah. And so, what was his name?
Steve Ward from
Steve
the
Ward.
Mothman Museum.
Okay.
I was hoping to get Jeff, who is the guy who owns the Mothman Museum.
Yeah.
But he was unavailable. But Steve was very happy to talk about Mothman, so I was like, "Yeah, I'll take you up on that."
Okay. Interesting. There was one guy that I wanted to talk about as well. A police officer that you at the beginning of
Yes,
the podcast is fascinating because he is driving in his car whilst on a chat with you,
I
going
was very
quite
nervous the
fast.
entire yeah. So that is Greg Lawson, who is the paranormal detective.
Yeah.
He works in a sheriff's office, essentially, I believe, in somewhere in America. So he is still functionally in law, but more as a training officer now.
Right.
He
Okay.
helps train the next generation in, detective and investigative technique.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically, he's always been fascinated with ghosts and the paranormal. And he travels around the country investigating using sort of police and detective investigative techniques, trying to
Okay.
take a more sort of trained approach to investigating,
Right.
which as a concept I really like.
Yeah. Yeah, for
To
sure.
kind of use your knowledge of actual investigating and evidence collection and having to actually prove things,
Yeah.
and then adapting it into the paranormal, which is relative. Normally, it's relatively easygoing.
Yeah.
It's kind of obviously it's very difficult to like lab produce evidence for the paranormal. You can't really test it.
Yeah. It's very, very, very hard
Yeah, but
because
yeah, I
even what
really
you
liked
do
his.
find have rational explanations nine
Yeah,
times out of 10.
yeah, and yeah, he's released a few books over the years. Um, and just
Nice.
yeah, really interesting, really knowledgeable about a lot of locations.
Yeah.
And I just found the entire sort of conversation with him to be quite interesting. Again, more from there's something about a police officer that makes him more.
Credible.
Yeah, there shouldn't be,
Mm.
but there is because of that sort of authority role. You're like,
Yeah.
I trust you for some innate reason,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No,
then
that makes a lot of sense.
so yeah. I'm just looking through the list. There's two other people that stand out that I think I interviewed.
Yeah.
Uh, David L. Sloan,
Right.
who is the keeper of Robert the Haunted Doll.
Oh yes. I
Yeah,
forgot you interviewed him.
he was the last guy I actually interviewed. And that kind of happened by chance. I saw, I think it was Zach Bagans' Haunted Object show,
Yeah.
which was basically a show where Zach Bagans had his little dungeony crypt sort of set that he filmed some behind the scenes stuff for Ghost Adventures in now,
Mm-hmm.
and he would basically have people who have haunted objects bring the haunted objects to him,
Right.
and then he
Yeah.
would in this nice enclosed space he would talk about the objects and delve a little more in. And I saw David Sloan on there with Robert the doll. And Robert obviously is one of the most famous dolls in the world,
Yeah.
alongside Annabelle.
Yeah.
It's the little sort of like foam kind of
Mm.
cloth doll with a sailor costume.
Yeah.
Um, and apparently, so David, apparently his life has been hell since he's been working with this doll. Like he's woken up at night hovering 6 foot above his bed.
Oh wow.
There were points where he was like, he was saying things have happened because this doll has lots of different entities attached to it, not just one.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's the entity of a boy or child or something attached to it, and then there's bodyguard spirits around it that will do anything to protect that main spirit.
Right.
Yeah, that is kind of a. I kind of he started talking. I kind of just sat back and let him go for
Of course, yeah.
about 20 minutes of that one because it was just like I don't know how to even respond to what he's saying.
Yeah.
Like he'd wake up at night being thrown across the room, or
Wow.
his
Did
wife would be there, and it's like I just need to. I don't even know how to deal with that.
yeah. So did he show you the doll?
He didn't because when we did the interview, he was away from Key West.
Right.
He tends to go back home to somewhere else in America that I can't remember during what would be tornado season.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Which is, I sort of said in the interview, the fact that that's something you even have to consider.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm like, yeah, just your house. Why aren't you at your house? He's like, yeah, tornado season in Florida. I was like, yes,
Yeah. Makes
that
a
is
lot
a
of
thing.
sense.
I don't. It's a bit windy here the other day too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just closed the window.
Yeah. We're not.
Yeah.
We are lucky here.
And then the other person who really stands out was Dr. Kate Sherrill.
Mm-hmm.
She was the co-host on Jack Osborne's Haunted Homecoming.
Ah, yes.
And she was the one that I think when we went to the blacksmith
Mm-hmm.
pub, you asked about how to do scrying and all that in the mirror for that one.
Yes.
She was the one who kind of explained it to me because she has a doctorate in medieval Gothic,
Right.
which
What
basically
is?
means things like seances,
Okay.
and the way the medieval and I guess the Victorian was it? And she might have a degree in Victorian Gothic actually.
Okay.
She got a degree in something Gothic,
Okay. Interesting.
or a doctorate. So
Yeah.
she is a doctor.
Incredible.
And basically, like, she does a lot of scrying, seances. She knows all the history of seances, and obviously was the co-host of Jack Osborne's show.
Yeah.
She's also one of the experts they have on Paranormal Caught on Camera,
Right. And what is that?
which is basically so that's a show on, I think it's on Really, and essentially it is just a collection of clips people submit.
So it's Nuke's top 5 on TV.
Pretty much, it's so you've seen Jack Osborne's show where he gets Ozzy and Sharon to sit around watching ghost stuff.
Yeah.
It's that, but with experts instead of Ozzy and Sharon.
Right. Okay.
Basically, 10 or so different experts from different fields of the paranormal, or people with connections to the paranormal.
Yeah.
Or come on, they show them clips, they talk about the clips. I think a couple of the other people that I've mentioned in this have also appeared on there as like experts or guest experts. I think Richard was on there.
Cool.
I think Greg was on there. But she's one of the like main experts on there.
Yeah.
And again, just one of those people you can just let talk because she's clearly very good at public speaking and talking. So it was kind of just tell me about seances, and then I could shut up for 20 minutes.
Yeah. The dream guest.
Yeah.
I do want to get I do want to get more guests on. I've really enjoyed. How many? I think we've had 3 guests. We've had Simon, Tom, and Ronnie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, loved it. I mean, on Atmo, we interviewed the satanic priests. That was a cool one. We interviewed a flat earther. That was cool. We interviewed a witch. So there's some really cool people out there. With some interesting beliefs that I think would be great to get on the show and have a chat with. And whether it be people you've already interviewed, Scott, or some different people, you are fantastic at reaching out to people and getting them on your show. So if you could get some people lined up for this show, that would be absolutely epic. So a few more questions. So obviously they're the people you interviewed, which obviously shows, and plus you're part of this team, which shows you do have an interest in the paranormal. So let's just go back to the start, which maybe we should have started with. Who knows? I'm a terrible interviewer. Where did it all begin for you with the paranormal?
It's kind of weird because I don't remember the beginning.
Yeah.
It's kind of always been a thing in the background. I mean, growing up, I was always, a big fan of Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted, anything that was on TV
Yeah.
that was kind of ghost related. A lot of the sort of mythological stuff used to really freak me out as a kid.
Right.
So I think around the age of about 6, there was a show on CITV, I think,
Mm-hmm.
that basically delved into Egyptian myths and things like that. And
Okay.
there was one very distinct period I remember where I wouldn't go upstairs by myself because every time I went to the bottom of the stairs and looked at the stairs, I thought I could see a weird sort of Egyptian mummy with wings at the top of the stairs.
Wow.
And that was purely like that. Clearly, something had just freaked me out that much
Yeah.
that in my head, when the light was off at the top of the stairs in the dark, I could see something that wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but so that I always used to be scared of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I just wasn't anymore. And then yeah, from there it kind of, like I say, TV shows like Ghost Adventures and that kind of going into different locations around the world kind of caught my eye because I was quite a big history fan. So going into places, more
Yeah.
historic kind of castles and things like that was always fun.
Okay.
Uh, and then I saw a shadow person,
You saw one.
which was the thing that kind of it was kind of a out of the corner of my eye sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what initially I went, don't know what that is,
Yeah.
need to know more. So, so for context, me and my mum, it was midday, possibly midweek, I can't remember. Um, I think I would have been about 11,
Mm-hmm.
and me and my mum were laid on her bed watching TV.
Mm-hmm.
And we both, out the corner of our eye, at the same time, saw a shadow come up the stairs. So from where we were standing, through the door to the room, you could just see through the railing, through the banister, sort of see the stairs, and we saw a shadow come up the stairs. And we thought it was that solid a figure. We thought my dad come upstairs,
Right.
so we shouted out to him to see what he wanted,
Mm.
etc. And then about 30 seconds later, he shouted up from the bottom of the stairs because he heard us shouting.
Right. Fucking hell.
Um, and again, I was convinced that someone had come up the stairs.
Yeah.
My mum also was fairly confident, so I wouldn't go look. I wouldn't like whatever came up the stairs would have gone straight into my room. That's
That's
kind of
not
the room
nice.
that was at the top of the stairs into
Yeah.
this room I'm in now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we went and looked in the end, and yeah, there was
Um,
nothing there basically.
oh my. I mean, that is horrendous. Um. Okay, so I can kind of see why that experience would
And
be
that was kind of
jarring.
the first thing that made me go,
Yeah.
"There's something I don't know what it is. I need to know."
Yeah, for sure. Did the fact that wherever or whatever that may have been would have ended up going into your room, did that like deter you from staying in your room for a little while?
Initially,
Yeah.
when it first happened, I was a bit like, I don't know if I want. I wouldn't go upstairs by myself for probably only a couple of days.
Not surprised though.
Um, it was that initial because it was such a shadow that I sort of went, that is a person. That is my
Yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's still downstairs.
Yeah. That's horrid.
And obviously because I still live in the same house,
Yeah.
through the years I have attempted to kind of debunk what I saw.
Yeah.
I have tried. I've laid in the same spot I was laid that day, looked through the same gap, varying different times of year, different weather, etc.
Mhm.
And never seen anything like it. Can't I can't think in my head what it would be.
Yeah.
There's nothing that should be casting a shadow in my house going up the stairs.
No. No. Absolutely not.
Um, and yeah, it was kind of one of those. Oh no, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, so my mum used to work in a pub,
Right.
and that pub was said to be haunted to the extent they had a kind of, I guess it's a African kind of influenced voodoo
Right.
priest or something
Okay.
come in and basically exorcise the building.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
It came in and got rid of whatever spirits were there.
Yeah.
So basically, the main thing of that was the upstairs of the building. They would come in the next day, close up for the night, come in the next day, and the upstairs taps would have been turned on in the upstairs bathroom, and the bathroom flooded like dozens of times. They had people checking
Jesus.
the taps,
Yeah.
nothing. And then they had this voodoo person volunteer to come in. I think they charged, so I was kind of like, I don't know if you've been scammed.
Yeah. Quite
But
possibly, but you
afterwards, it
never
did
know.
stop.
Oh wow.
That came in, and then it hasn't happened since. In the 10 years since then.
So that was money well spent, really.
But yeah, I guess so. But my mum used to work weekends alone in that pub.
Oh wow.
So I'd sometimes go up and keep her company.
Yeah.
Um, and regularly you would see again shadow figures. I think most of the people that I've spoken to in the years since that have worked there or still work there have at some point seen kind of unexplained shadows darting around.
Yeah. That's
There's
horrid.
specifically from behind the bar, there is a window that goes out into the doorway walking in.
Yeah.
So you walk in through the main door, there's a passage, and this window looks into the passage.
Right.
And regularly, you'd see a shadow walk past that. You think someone's coming in, get ready to serve them,
Yeah.
etc. And then nobody would walk in.
Oh. And
And
there's
again,
no
that's
way
another
for a
place.
shadow to be cast there.
Not unless someone's walked in, changed their mind, and walked out again.
Right. But it would be such a regular
Um,
occurrence that why on
yeah,
earth would
for,
that
for
be
that for that
happening?
to happen like 6 times a day,
Yeah. Oh my
every
words.
day.
Yeah.
And then it sort of got to the point that I know there were cleaners there who wouldn't clean upstairs alone.
Oh my word.
So that they'd be tasked to go upstairs, So the building basically was built a couple of 100 years ago.
Hmm.
And it served as a few things throughout its sort of tenure. It's been a library. I want to say there's 3 buildings sort of in the area, and Google's kind of reluctant. So there's a church, and though there used to be a church that I think got knocked down or burnt down. There's a guild hall, which is just like a big sort of market hall, kind of town hall kind of place, and this building. One of them was a morgue at one point.
Oh. Okay.
I don't know which, and I don't know when, but it's kind of like knowing that one of them was, and
Yeah.
knowing that all 3 had or have had ghostly sort of stuff happen. Because I also, on top of that, I did work experience in the Guildhall
Yeah.
one when I was in school. And as a part of that, again, I had to just like sit around on my own in different rooms and do different bits of work.
Mm-hmm.
Work experience, you tend to task people with
Yeah.
meaningless tasks that have
Yeah.
no real effect on anything.
Yeah.
You tend to make something up that you're never going to actually use, but it's something for them to do for a couple of
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
I was sat in what is known as the mayor's parlour,
Right.
which is like the really fancy room upstairs where, I guess back when it was the actual Guildhall sort of place, the mayor would be based,
Mm-hmm.
or the town, council would be based. And in there, I did an EVP session on my BlackBerry. I
Oh
still
wow.
remember it in great detail.
Oh, that's sick.
And I asked a load of questions, had no reply.
Mm.
Asked what happened to the ghost there, and after I asked that, you hear something reply, "Hung."
Oh wow. Fucking hell.
What happened to you here?
Then I found out that used to be, so there's cells in the basement because it used to be a jail and potentially courthouse
No
where
way.
they potentially would have. But that was all stuff I found out afterwards from, again, speaking to cleaners who didn't like being there on their own at night.
Yeah. Oh,
But yeah,
that's
that's
insane.
kind of a. It was one of those things. It's kind of a. I always forget that I kind of did that.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I'm like, oh yeah, I did do an EVP thing that I did get a reply. I think it's probably the only time I've got a reply on an EVP. And it was like, yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
But
That's insane.
it's a really cool location.
Yeah.
I might
Oh,
have the
wow.
EVP file somewhere, so I'll see if I can find it.
Do you think there's any way that we could get in there or not?
I've reached out there now because it's now a company. They won't
Oh, right. Okay. So it's like someone's
rent it
company
out.
offers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. That's fair enough.
yeah. I've tried with a few things. They're also that's the same with the island near me that I keep trying to get us onto,
Yeah.
which again they won't do because it's now being commercialized into a hotel, I think.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Well, thank you
Hmm.
for this. So I want to keep these to about 45 minutes. We're now coming up to 45 minutes for these one-on-ones. There won't be a Patreon question of the pod in this one because I want to keep it for like when there's a few of us so that the patrons get the most answers out of us. But if you want to become a patron, you can for as little as £1 a month, where you get behind the scenes, you get extra episodes of the pod. You get early access, and you also get like a group chat on Patreon where you can chat to us. And you also get to ask questions that get asked in this podcast. So, yeah, if you want to do that, head over to patreon.com/DudeRhino. But, yeah, Scott, thank you so much for this. It's been awesome. And it's been a great insight into your passion for the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, guys, check out Tepper's Paranormal, the podcast as well over there. Like I say, you've interviewed some really cool people. They're great interviews, and I highly recommend going and listening to them. But yeah, Scott, cheers, mate. And
No,
everyone at home, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Share the pod around, and we will see you next week. See you later, everyone.